I felt witnessed in a feeling that I had been having for a long time. And it was the nicest way of being told to settle down, to calm down this energy engine that has run me off the road and out of the guardrails for so long. I mean, there are minimal guardrails. As a poet for a living, I'm kind of required to try everything.
Required because it's not, no one's going to pay you $100,000 a year to salary to write. Yeah. It's,
and no one did. I worked. I made that happen a couple times on my own drive.
Sure. But no one's hiring a poet on ZipRecruiter right now.
Right.
Yeah. No, that's something that I always respected about the people who I knew that went into not just poetry but other careers where, there were a lot of voices saying, "Hey, how are you gonna make that work? How are you gonna make a living? How is this gonna happen for someone that's going to be a poet?" I had, actually, I met you. Not that you would remember this interaction at all. It was a very brief moment. You were performing in Houston. I want to say like 2017. And I had driven a couple of hours because a woman that I had known for many years named Natasha Carrizosa was also performing on that same stage. And I had respected her so much because she had done a lot for poetry in the community that I live in here in Fort Worth and in Arlington. And she moved away, and she had lived in Houston for like 5 years and still every week would drive up to host her weekly open mic at this Jamaican restaurant in Arlington. She'd drive 5 hours both ways to make that happen. And it
Wait, is this with Michael Gwynn and Janine Livingston?
They were in Fort Worth, right? Janine was in Fort Worth and Michael Gwynn was in Fort Worth. Natasha hosted a separate thing from what they had done. But I used to go to that one all the time too.
I was at the separate thing?
No, this was in Houston. So she was kind of doing two of these different things. So
Gotcha.
I don't remember the name of the place. I wish I knew the name and I could.
Was it like a?
It's like an outdoor venue, and you had this crowd of people who clearly had known you since high school.
Yeah, I went to because I grew up in Baytown.
Yeah, there was a whole crowd of them.
Yeah, I'm going to let you finish your story, and then I'm going to tell you what was happening.
Oh, I would love, because I've wondered for years. I remember seeing that moment on stage when they showed up.
Well, it was a nightmare for me, but I don't want to interrupt. I think you were headed somewhere. Houston. Oh, when we crossed paths originally.
Oh, yeah. So I really have been drawn. I think a lot of people who have, quote unquote normal jobs or careers like me, we get kind of beaten down by the routine and the stability of it. I guess it's the inversion of a life of a poet in some ways. Like, hey, I'm not being creative at all, but I've also got all the stability and routine that I could ask for. I was so drawn to her work and your work that I drove down there just to be in that moment. And I remember that I think she thought I drove there for her. I love her. She's wonderful. But she gave me like a 5-minute intro. She saw me in the back of the crowd and talked about me. I don't deserve the spotlight in this moment at all. Everyone else is there to see you guys perform. And you said you were standing behind me this whole time. I had no idea. And she gets kind of at the end of her big, long soliloquy about me. And she gets to the end of it, and the crowd just gives nothing in return. No one cared. Of course, no one's there for me. And it just is so awkwardly silent. And I hear this.
What awful thing did I say?
You just said, "Sanger. Yes. Thank goodness." And then I bought your book and you signed it and you wrote "Sanger, thank goodness," and that is like one of my most prized possessions because it was just such a it felt such like a Buddy Wakefield thing to say. Not that I've known you personally in any way, but your work resonates this odd sense of calm, even poems that aren't calm and aren't about being calm. But there's like this weird
intention of landing. It came in high school. My intention fundamentally came in high school, very straight up from starting drugs early and doing acid and laying in bed. I never was the social, like, well, I'll keep it simple. Hallucinogens were the first thing I ever tried before alcohol or anything. And so I just remember thinking that I would only like to be alone at a certain point, because I really liked exploring my mind and listening to music. And I only wanted to listen to music, no matter how dark it got. I only wanted to listen to it if I knew that they were going to land me in a purposeful place. Like, I couldn't just listen to like Slayer.
Yeah.
I needed them to be going somewhere that was where there was some clear writing on the wall at the end of it. And so fundamentally, that took hold really early in my writing, where I knew I had to process a lot of dark and heavy things. And I also knew I didn't want to leave that on my audience's shoulders or my own. And so, yeah, there was real intention there.
What does it look like to leave it on the audience's shoulders?
Oh, it's embarrassing. Leaving it on the audience's shoulders for me means, like I saw a woman do a rape poem at a bar one time. And it's just not the place to do it. It's a bad choice. When there's people, not everybody there is there to see poetry that night.
Yeah.
And it's a bar. There's people in the back. And you can't expect some things you just shouldn't give an audience.
Okay.
In certain situations. And it's that feeling. I watched people in the back of the bar get really uncomfortable. And while I had every, bit of compassion for the woman, she was choosing to leave that on unsuspecting people's shoulders. And so I just always read the room. Does that answer the question?
It kind of does. I understand a little bit. I don't think what you're saying is that you have to completely work through everything that you ever want to write or share before you share it or write it. Or is that what you're saying? Some poets will.
There's just such an intention for me to leave clear writing on the wall, for people to land in a better place than where it started. And I just don't want them leaving the room heavier than they came in. And so it is intentional that first, and right now is a great example, because I love being a writer so I can edit myself, because when I speak, I'm so fallible. I'm like my mother. I can completely wander off the point and never come back to it, completely forget the question. But in writing, I'm not leaving until I get what I'm going for. And I've proven that in everything I've written. Horsehead, for example, took 4 months, and I worked at like a 3 months. I worked at like a 9-to-5 job, and it's a 4-minute long piece. So, and this is why, in 20 years, there's only been 3 albums and 4 books, or 5 books, instead of, I don't want, at the end of my career, I don't want, to have 20 albums with 1 or 2 good songs on each one. I want everyone from front to back to have delivered exactly what I was going for. And so when I'm with an audience, I know exactly what I'm leaving them with. And it's not extemporaneous or stream of consciousness or, something unedited that I hope lands.
Yeah. That's a conscious decision, it would seem like, at every point throughout the process. There's something that I get a lot from hearing your work, and it's this overwhelming feeling that every word was carefully crafted and on purpose. And there's a lot of good writing and good music good poetry. It doesn't feel that way exactly. So I'm not saying that just to applaud you in any way, although I think it's a compliment in some way. But that's how do you continue to make that a present focus for you when you're going through that writing process?
Well, I'm
or is that just how you are?
I'm pretty scared of my own editing process at this point. There's such a standard and a demand of myself, and it used to just be a channel. It used to just be intuitive, and then I would go through and tweak. I finally gotten to a point where I can actually teach it. I have criteria that I have. Excuse me. What's there's my baseline writing. The first time I sit down, you don't have to be brilliant every time you show up. You just have to show up. And so when I just show up and I get stuff down on paper, and then I'm panning for gold and looking for what resonates and what I want to keep, and then I'm applying these 5 criteria to it, and then I'm combing through. I mean, there's a and then there's, I have to pay attention to every detail. There's the rhythm. It's right down to the small words, at, the, if.
Yeah.
And it's all of those that I will develop. I'll place every word so that the rhythm continually makes the most sense, and that the meaning makes the most sense, and the logic checks out the most, even if it's just a little bit more. And if it's a decision, and it's always the decision that's more exciting. I heard a guy named Jack Plotnick say one time that the universe always rewards a joyful risk. And so in the writing, when two things sort of seem parallel or aligned, like my choices, it's always going to be the one that's a little bit riskier. It's always going to be the word that I made up. That
you'll go with the risk instead of the safe option.
Instead of what could find itself nestling into a cliche.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm gonna throw a horse at it. I'm gonna break a glass over whatever it is his head, and then we're gonna get to the bottom of it. And we're not gonna dawdle around on the beach with lovers and starfish.
Yeah.
Too many moons, and we're gonna use all those things as a doorway, and then we're gonna find out what's behind them, and we're gonna take it on tour and make them better people.
How do you balance that with this intentionality, right? Because on one hand, it sounds like what you're saying is, I want it to be very, very clear to the audience and to the listener exactly what to take away from this. And then on the other hand, I'm going to risk that they don't, or I'm going to risk being misinterpreted.
and I have been.
I would imagine that you have been a lot. But for that reason, right? Your poetry isn't roses are red, violets are blue. It's not really that easy to understand sometimes.
Well, I expect my audience to meet me halfway.
Yeah.
I want a smart audience. So first of all, baseline, they're going to have to, some of it's going to wash over them. They're going to have to read it a second and third time. Yeah. But I'm not just saying stuff to sound cool. Logically, it's going to check out. The image is going to check out with the feeling that used to carry different words with it. And whether consciously or unconsciously, they know that something legit is happening. Like hurling crowbirds at mocking bars when I say that I smashed a beehive against the ocean to try and make our splash last longer. Remember, all the honey had me looking like a jellyfish ape, but you walked off the water in a porcupine of light. Strands of gold drizzled out to the tips of your wasps. This is an apology letter to the both of us for how long it took me to let things go. So there's all this abstraction that it's bookended with very definite statements. And so in between, I'm allowed that movement and that color that keeps a mind excited. And it's just, all that was just to say, this is an apology letter to the both of us for how long it took me to let things go. I was just trying to make our splash last longer. And that's it. But I think there's something, I almost said the word invigorating, which is a little too much like a shampoo, but that's how the editing process, exhibit A of the editing process. So that's it. You have to steer me back into when I miss the points, Sanger, because
this is the least committed I've been to the agenda of the show. ever, and I knew that before I turned this on today.